Vala, night the third. Now sat the King of Light on high upon his starry throne, and bright Ahania bowed herself before his splendid feet. O Urizen, look on me, like a mournful stream I embrace round thy knees and wet my bright hair with my tears. Why sighs, my lord? Are not the morning stars thy obedient sons? Do they not bow their bright heads at thy voice? At thy command do they not fly into their stations and return their light to thee? The immortal atmospheres are thine. There thou art seen in glory, surrounded by the ever-changing daughters of the light. Why wilt thou look upon futurity, darkening present joy? She ceased. The prince, his light obscured, and the splendors of his crown enfolded in thick clouds, from whence his mighty voice burst forth. O bright Ahania, a boy is born of the dark ocean, whom Urizen doth serve, with light replenishing his darkness. I am set here a king of trouble, commanded here to serve and do my ministry to those who eat of my wide table. All this is mine, yet I must serve, and that prophetic boy must grow up to command as prince. But hear my determined decree. Vala shall become a worm in Enitharmon's womb, laying her seed upon the fibers soon to issue forth. And Luva in the loins of loss, a dark and furious death. Alas for me, what will become of me at that dread time? Ahania bowed her head and wept 7 days before the king. And on the 8th day, when his clouds unfolded from his throne, she raised her bright head, sweet perfumed, and thus with heavenly voice. O Prince, the Eternal One hath set thee leader of his hosts. Leave all futurity to him. Resume thy fields of light. Why didst thou listen to the voice of Luva that dreadful morn, to give the immortal steeds of light to his deceitful hands? No longer now obedient to thy will, thou art compelled to form the curbs of iron and brass, to build the iron mangers, to feed them with intoxication from the wine presses of Luva, till the divine vision and fruition is quite obliterated. They call thy lions in the fields of blood. They rouse thy tigers out of the halls of justice, till these dens thy wisdom framed, golden and beautiful, but oh, how unlike the sweet fields of bliss, where liberty was justice and eternal science was mercy. Then, oh dear my lord, listen to Ahania. Listen to the vision of Ahania in the slumbers of Urizen, when Urizen slept in the porch and the ancient man was smitten. The darkening man walked on the steps of fire before his halls, and Vala walked with him in dreams of soft deluding slumber. He looked up and saw thee, Prince of Light, thy splendor faded, but saw not Lost nor Enitharmon, for Luva hid them in shadow, in a soft cloud outstretched across, and Luva dwelt in the cloud. Then man ascended mourning into the splendors of his palace. Above him rose a shadow from his wearied intellect of living gold, pure, perfect, holy. In white linen pure he hovered, a sweet entrancing self-delusion, a watery vision of man, soft exulting in existence, all the man absorbing. Man fell upon his face prostrate before the watery shadow, saying, O Lord, whence is this change? Thou knowest I am nothing. And Vala trembled and covered her face, and her locks were spread on the pavement. I heard astonished at the vision, my heart trembled within me. I heard the voice of the slumberous man, and thus he spoke, idolatrous to his own shadow, words of eternity uttering. Oh, I am nothing when I enter into judgment with thee. If thou withdraw thy breath, I die and vanish into Hades. If thou dost lay thine hand upon me, behold, I am silent. If thou withhold thy hand, I perish like a fallen leaf. No, I am nothing, and to nothing must return again. If thou withdraw thy breath, behold, I am oblivion. He ceased. The The shadowy voice was silent, but the cloud hovered over their heads in golden wreaths, the sorrow of man. And the balmy drops fell down, and lo, that son of man, that shadowy spirit of the fallen one, Luva, descended from the cloud. In terror Albion rose, indignant rose the awful man, and turned his back on Vala. Why roll thy clouds and sickening mists? I can no longer hide the dismal vision of my eyes. Love and life, light, prophetic dreads urge me to speak. Futurity is before me like a dark lamp. Eternal death haunts all my expectation. Rent from eternal brotherhood, we die and are no more. I heard the voice of Albion starting from his sleep. Whence is this voice crying Enian that soundeth in my ears? O cruel pity, dark deceit, can love seek for dominion? And Luva strove to gain dominion over the mighty Albion. They strove together above the body where Vala was enclosed, and the dark body of Albion left prostrate upon the crystal pavement covered with boils from head to foot, the terrible smitings of Luva. Then frowned the fallen man and put forth Luva from his presence. I heard him. Frown not, Urizen, but listen to my vision, saying, Go and die the death of man for Vala the sweet wanderer. I will turn the volutions of your ears outward and bend your nostrils downward, and your flux-out eyes and globed roll round in fear. Your withering lips and tongue shrink up into a narrow circle, till into narrow forms you creep. Go take your fiery way and learn what 'tis to absorb the man, you spirits of pity and love. O Urizen, why art thou pale at the visions of Ahania? Listen to her who loves thee, lest we also are driven away. They heard the voice and fled swift as the winter's setting sun, and now the human blood foamed high. I saw that Luva and Vala went down the human heart where paradise and its joys abounded, in jealous fears and fury and rage, and flames rolled round their fervid feet, and the vast form of nature like a serpent played before them. As they went enfolding fires and thunders of the deep, Vala shrunk in like the dark sea that leaves its slimy banks, and from her bosom loft fell far as the east and west, and the vast form of nature like a serpent rolled between. She ended, for from his wrathful throne burst forth the black hailstorm. Am I not God, said Urizen? Who is equal to me? Do I not stretch the heavens abroad, or fold them up like a garment? He spoke, mustering his heavy clouds around him, black, opaque. Then thunders rolled around, and lightnings darted to and fro. His visage changed to darkness, and his strong right hand came forth to cast Ahania to the earth. He seized her by the hair, and threw her from the steps of ice that froze around his throne, saying, Art thou also become like Vala? Thus I cast thee out. Shall the feminine indolent bliss, the indulgent self of weariness, the passive idle, sleep the enormous night and darkness of death, set herself up to give her laws to the act of masculine virtue? Thou little diminutive portion that darest be a counterpart, thy passivity, thy laws of obedience and insincerity are my abhorrence. Wherefore hast thou taken that fair form? Whence is this power given to thee? Once thou wast in my breast a sluggish current of dim waters, on whose verdant margin a cavern shagged with horrid shades, dark, cool, and deadly, where I laid my head in the hot noon after the broken clods had wearied me. There I laid my plough, there my horses fed, and thou hast risen with thy moist locks into a watery image, reflecting all my indolence, my weakness, my death, to weigh me down beneath the grave into nonentity, where Luva strives, scorned by Vala, age after age wandering, shrinking and shrinking from her lord, and calling him the tempter. Art thou also become like Vala? Thus I cast thee out. So loud in thunders spoke the king, folded in dark despair, and threw a Hania from his bosom obdurate. She fell like lightning. Then fled the sons of Urizen from his thunderous throne petrific. They fled to east and west, and left the north and south of heaven. A crash ran through the immense. The bounds of destiny were broken. The bounds of destiny crashed direful, and the swelling sea burst from its bonds in whirlpools fierce, roaring with human voice, triumphing even to the stars in bright Ahania's fall. Down from the dismal north, the prince in thunders and thick clouds, as when the thunderbolt down falleth on the appointed place, fell down, rushing, ruining, thundering, shuddering into the caverns of the grave, in places of human seed, where the impressions of despair and hope enroot forever a world of darkness. Ahania felt far into nonentity. She continued falling. Loud the crash continued loud, and hoarse from the crash roared a flame of blue sulphurous fire. From the flame a dolorous groan that struck with dumbness, all confusion, swallowing up the horrible din in agony on agony. Through the confusion, like a crack across from immense to immense, loud, strong, a universal groan of death, louder than all the racking elements, deafened and rented worse than Urizen in all his hosts, and cursed despair down rushing. But from the dolorous groan, one like a shadow of smoke appeared, and human bones rattling together in the smoke, and stamping the nether abyss, and gnashing in fierce despair, panting in sobs, thick, short, incessant, bursting, sobbing, deep despairing, stamping, struggling to utter the voice of man, struggling to take the features of man, struggling to take the limbs of man. At length emerging from the smoke of Urizen, dashed in pieces from his precipitant fall, Tharmas reared up his hands and stood in the affrighted ocean. The dead reared up his voice and stood on the resounding shore, crying, fury in my limbs, destruction in my bones and marrow, my skull riven into filaments, my eyes into sea jellies floating upon the tide wander, bubbling and bubbling, uttering my lamentations and begetting little monsters who sit mocking upon the little pebbles of the tide, in all my rivers and on dried shells that the fish have quite forsaken. Fool, fool to lose my sweetest bliss. Where art thou, Enian? Too near to cunning, too far off and yet too near. Dash down, I send thee into distant darkness, far as my strength can hurl thee. Wander there, and laugh and play among the frozen arrows. They will tear thy tender flesh. Fall off afar from Tharmas, come not too near my strong fury. Scream and fall off and laugh at Tharmas, lovely summer beauty, till winter rends thee into shivers, as thou hast rended me. So Tharmas bellowed o'er the ocean, thundering, sobbing, bursting. The bounds of destiny were broken, and hatred now began instead of love to Enian. Enian, blind and age-bent, plunged into the cold billows, living a life in midst of waters. In terrors she withered away to Entutha and Benethon, a world of deep darkness where all things and horrors are rooted. These are the words of Enian, heard from the cold waters of despair. O Tharmas, I had lost thee, and when I hoped I had found thee. O Tharmas, do not destroy me quite, but let a little shadow, but a little showery form of Enian be near thee, love-terror. Let me still remain, and then do thou thy righteous doom upon me. Only let me hear thy voice. Driven by thy rage, I wander like a cloud into the deep, where never yet existence came. There, losing all my life, I back return, weaker and weaker. Consume me not away in thy great wrath. Though I have sinned, though I have rebelled, make me not like the things forgotten as they had not been. Make not the thing that loveth thee a tear wiped away. Tharmas replied, riding on storms, his voice of thunder rolled. Image of grief, thy fading lineaments make my eyelids fail. What have I done? Both rage and mercy are alike to me. Looking upon thee, image of faint waters, I recoil from my fierce rage into thy semblance. Ennian, return. Why does thy piteous face vanish like a rainy cloud, melting, a shower of falling tears, nothing but tears? Ennian, substanceless, voiceless, weeping, vanish, nothing but tears. Ennian, art thou forever vanished from the watery eyes of Tharmas? Rage, rage shall never from my bosom, winds and waters of woe consuming all to the end consuming. Love and hope are ended. For now no more remained of Ennian in the dismal air, only a voice eternal wailing in the elements. Where Ennian, blind and age-bent, wandered, Ahania wanders now. She wanders in eternal fear of falling into the indefinite, for her bright eyes behold the abyss. Sometimes a little sleep weighs down her eyelids, then she falls. Then starting, wakes in fears, sleepless to wander round, repelled on the margin of non-entity. The end of the third night.